Oh, you can't. You can. You will say, I move to approve the minutes with the correction of Counselor Sims. He did not move to adjourn. I don't know who moved to adjourn. I think it was Counselor White. Smith. Oh, it was Counselor Smith. Yeah. He sat where Counselor Smith sat. So, Steve, do you remember moving to adjourn?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not mean this. Counselor Smith, you moved to adjourn. Well, that was you go to. I might have said it. Too long. I know about you over. Sims. From you adjourn. Say Counselor. So say you vote for Friday, I vote to remove my. Hey guys. Smiles. Running late, we're running late. Counselor Schmal, with the amendment of Counselor Zelinski, move to adjourn. There you go.
Yeah, those get set up. Yes, exactly.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we begin the meeting. All right, everybody ready? Be ready? Yeah, I should.
Time being, turn the microphone on, time being 6:17, I call to order the City of Glenwood Springs City Council meeting, and it's June 5th, 2025. This is our regular City Council meeting. Good evening, everybody. And Ryan, would you please take a roll call?
Mayor Dame,
Here.
Councillor Townsley, Councillor Schmal, Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski, Councillor Weimer, Councillor Schachter, Councillor Smith. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ryan. A second item on the agenda is changes or conflicts. Any councillor have any changes to propose or conflicts to disclose? See none, we move on to council announcements. Councillor Smith, are you trying to, the bottom right? There you go. Thank you. Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you. A handful of fairly quick ones.
Microphone. Down. Yep, thank you.
Oh, that all I have to do is just push it down. I saw the color and just launched. Tuesday, June 10th is Bike There Free Breakfast Day. The free breakfast part's the key part. The council members have little slips reminding you about that. We have extras for anybody else who's interested in the details. But it's the first big event of the bicycling season, promotional things hosted and financially sponsored by the city of Glenwood Springs, plus several local businesses. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Look for the details or ask me about the details. Second, the Garfield Clean Energy Board met on May 16th. And among other things, discussed some emerging new energy efficiency building standards that are coming through state review and then distribution out for cities to consider. The city is currently up to date on the International Energy Conservation Code. Within its own code, there's going to be a new version coming for consideration. The fun thing is tomorrow there is a Thermal Energy Networks workshop that Clean Energy Economy for the region and Garfield Clean Energy are hosting right here in Glenwood Springs. This is the concept where you can use basically underground plumbing and underground fluids to generate heat or to generate power from that. And with the coincidental renewed investment in underground infrastructure in the city of Glenwood Springs with the new funding for streets and infrastructure, this is an opportunity to consider an additional utility in that work. Happily, we've got senior staff from this from the city signed up for that workshop. But watch for that, those results. I think it's going to be pretty revealing. The Historic Preservation Commission met on June 2. They are beginning to discuss, just the first time of discussing some potential financial incentives for the renovation and preservation and maintenance of historic structures that will be a set of standards initially, but then that can lead to some potential new funding sources for individual owners to keep up their commercial or residential homes. Coming up June 21st and 22nd is the Colorado Preservation Inc. Conference. That also came out of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. I think some commission members are going. It's a statewide rally of people like that. So we hopefully will learn from that. I will attend the Colorado Communities for Climate Action Board Conference as the city's representative to that board, June 11 to 13. You've got questions or advice on the topic of municipal climate action, I'd welcome those before then. Otherwise, I'll bring back a report. Finally, the Transportation Commission had its regular meeting on Tuesday. It had two specific requests for the council, and that is that the commission would like to review the just last week released comprehensive safety action plan document from the consultants that ultimately is going to come to city council for consideration and perhaps adoption. The commission would like an opportunity to dig into that final report some more before council takes action. The commission next will meet on July 1, and they're seeking our indulgence to wait on our consideration of that until they can put in their input and recommendations. Their second offer is that, as they do every year, the Transportation Commission will be bringing their annual recommendations for the long-range transportation plan update in the form of policy and project priority rankings that becomes part of the city's budgeting process for the future fiscal year. That too will be discussed by the commission at its July 1st meeting, and they'd like to have the opportunity to fit into the city's calendar for the budget appropriately, perhaps as is typical with a work session sometime soon. So they're available for that, but they'd like the leeway to do it at their regular meeting July 1st and then bring that stuff back to the council after that. Finally, the commission had a party and some nice little speeches and some commemoration of 12 years of service on the Transportation Commission by Ralph Trapani. He did it over 2 stints over a very long period of time. He moved here 50 years ago to work on an interchange project near Rifle, and then was tagged to manage engineering of and construction of the Glenwood Canyon I-70 project, which prompted some other people to move here and stick around, including one of our own city council members. Ralph has since been involved professionally or otherwise in pretty much every major transportation project up and down the valley, including the Shale Bluffs mitigation, the 4-laning and transit mitigations for Highway 82, the Grand Avenue Bridge, and the Roaring Fork Transportation Authority 2040 funding campaign. He currently chairs the CLEAR board, Clean Energy Economy for the region. He is a doer and did a lot for this city through his service in the Transportation Commission. So I'm kind of going beyond announcements to make a little speech in appreciation of Ralph instead of doing a certificate of stuff. Ralph has done great work, and we really appreciate his service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thanks for your announcements. Councillor Selinsky, please.
I'm super brief. Wilderness Workshop is having their annual party at Silvers Park Thursday, the 12th. I forgot to write down the hours, but I believe it's in the afternoon. And so just mark your calendars for that. And also it's far out, but September 27th, there will be the aviation export at our very own KGWS Glenwood Springs Municipal Airport.
All right, thank you. Any other announcements? We'll see none. We'll move on to item 4, citizens appearing before council for items that are not on the agenda. Please step up. You got 3 minutes. We'll see none. We'll close that as well and move on to the consent agenda. I'm entertaining a motion in the consent agenda. And we got Councillor Schmall, please.
I would move to approve the consent agenda with the correction of the motion to adjourn from the last meeting was made by Councillor Zelinski, not Councillor Sims.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a motion to approve. And we got Councillor Townsley.
I second it.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? See none. All in favor, say aye. Aye. And those opposed? We'll see none. Thank you. Before we move on, I'd like to thank Adam Decker for being a member of the Transportation Commission. He was promoted to a regular seat. And also Tate Fairbanks for re-upping his mandate with the Urban Renewal Authority. So thanks both to them for being on their commissions. And that takes us into item 6. And that is discussion with Lift Up about food insecurity.
That would be us.
That'd be you. Excellent. Please state your name for the record.
John Lund, I'm vice chair of the board of Lift Up. And this is Jess Hedden. She's the interim director of operations at this point.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you.
Doing her hard work down just around the corner. And I saw somebody checking on our tech equipment to go and see if we had our screen, so that's a good thing. Very good.
And then do we need to share it?
Yes.
You want to hit that button?
All right. Ready to hear this guy?
What? I'd be the one.
Need to be in the app.
Oh, God. You need to be in here.
This is really not about PowerPoints. It's about a crisis that we have in our valley. We talk a lot about the affordable housing crisis. And I think you probably hear a lot about that from various folks trying to address that problem. We're at a bit more basic level. We're talking about a food insecurity crisis. What food insecurity crisis is defined as is simply a situation where a family or an individual doesn't have enough money, resources to get themselves the food that they need. And that's where we are in this valley at this point. I'm gonna skip some of these in the interest of time. Lift Up has been involved in doing work in this area for 40 years, founded in Rifle as part of the oil shale collapse 40 years ago, and has been, as you probably know, involved in essentially being the first responder in bringing food to people that don't have it or can't afford to buy what they need. And we say responder very intentionally because we respond as the need changes. Our function is essentially to fill bellies from Parachute to Aspen. People are hungry, they come to us, we provide them with food. We do it several different ways. You probably know that there is a pantry for Lift Up over in the Catholic Charities building on 10th and Grand. There's also a soup table, extended table, we call it, that operates out of the First Methodist Church here in Glenwood, but there's 5 other pantries up and down the valley. We consider our territory to be from Parachute all the way to Aspen. We also hand out these 72-hour emergency food bags for people that simply need that on an emergency basis. And do have some federal funding, but you know, question mark, right, about federal funding for anything in this area. New for 2025, and in part to try to be more responsive, we were beneficiaries of a donation to be able to put together the trailer that you see. That thing is essentially a pantry on wheels. You can pull that anywhere if you have the right big enough truck. And by the way, we're short a truck right now, but you can pull that anywhere that you feel it's good to distribute food. You might go to Redstone with it or somewhere that's sort of off the beaten path that people can't get to. And then they can walk in there and it's basically shelves with food. And they can take from that pantry just as though they do at one of our fixed pantries. The way that works for us is people get a certain number of credits when they come to the pantry. They can't just, pull everything off the table, come as often they like. They have a constraint in sort of a number of credits. If you're an individual, you have X credits. If you're a family of 4 with 2 kids, you have Y credits, and you can use them throughout the course of the various pantry locations. But it is constrained. It's important because it gives people the chance to pick what they want, which is something of a dignity. It's a little different than, here, take this bag of food, enjoy whatever's in there. We didn't look closely, but it's for you and you should be happy. I mean, this is a bit more of a human way to do this, to be able to let people select. And we find it's more efficient, because if you hand people bags of food that have things in them they don't really care for, it's just going to waste. This is another program that Lift Up's deeply involved with. It's called Farm to Food Pantry. We have currently 10 different orchards or farms in the Western Colorado area that we have contracts with to buy fresh produce and meat and everything that you want to be able to put on the table. Obviously, that's got benefits for the local growers because they can get a stabilized source of revenue for their crops, but it's a benefit for our guests because they can get fresh and healthy food. Another significant source of food for us is the Food Bank of the Rockies. That's one of our partners, but what we're getting from them is more the staple supplies, canned goods, that sorts of thing. My slide deck's a little different today than I was thinking, so give me just a sec. I want to talk for a minute. I'm going to go forward and then come back to this. We got way too much. Okay. There's something called the Mountain Coalition for Food and Nutrition Security. And by the way, the city of Glenwood Springs supports it, and we thank you for that. This is all of the various entities, Food Bank of the Rockies included, Lift Up included, Harvest for Hunger included, who are making efforts to collect food from places that it can be found and then distribute that food. It's a regional approach, and our region is what I've mentioned. The reason I mentioned this thing we call McFinn's is because some of the work that we've done as Lift Up is really to try to fit into being the cornerstone for this operation. And pardon me for jumping around, but I'm going to do it because it's more efficient than resorting the slides. In 23, McFinn's, this set of entities got together and put together a strategic plan with some significant things they thought were important to address food insecurity here in our valley. One is they said there should be no more than 25 miles between food distribution sites. So that's why we're up and down the area. The same people who have trouble finding housing and finding food also have trouble with transportation. So you need to find them where they are. More locally sourced food. I mentioned the Farm to Food Pantry program. That's been implemented in part of that effort. Nutrition that aligns with personal choice. That's why we use these pantries as a way. During COVID, we were just letting people, they were driving through and just getting a bag of food, but we've ceased that, and now they come to the pantries. Most significantly, and the reason really that we are making presentations like this to not only the city of Glenwood Springs, but every town and county up and down our region, is that it was decided it would make the most sense efficiently to have a shared food hub. And what that means is a place that you can warehouse, you can refrigerate, you can store, and you can distribute from, which is centrally located. I don't know if any of the counselors know where that's located now. It's located in the Midland Center on Midland Avenue, right across from the bus station. What happened is Lift Up stepped forward and made a commitment to buy a piece of property over there. It's a warehouse in a condominiumized facility there. And that is now the food hub for all of this food distribution. We can go, out to Parachute and up to Aspen from there more efficiently than where we used to be, which was in Aspen all the time. You want to add something?
Rifle. It was in Rifle.
I'm sorry, in Rifle. I always think of it as a long drive, but I think it's because we talked about it being 80 some miles. Okay, back to, I'm not doing all these slides. That's trying to move along. This is what's happened in the last few years. That is our data, 130% growth, 138% growth in the number of guests and the number of visits. The difference between guests and visits is if you're there with for a family of four, that's 4 guests that came to see, if that's the credit you had when you got there. So it's just how we count things. The significant thing is, look at that line going up. And that's post-COVID. That's just in the last 2 years. That's Glenwood Springs as well as Rifle, as well as, Carbondale. It's everywhere that the growth has been. Meanwhile, this is what's happening on the other side. Where'd it go? I'm so sorry to be doing this. There you go. In that same 2-year period, that's the same upward line arrow that you see. Look what's happened with our donations, with our financial support. It is sunk. We have the same number of donors. We're analyzing this. We have the same number of people supporting Lift Up, but the amount they're contributing has been put under pressure as well. Because a lot of the people that support Lift Up, we all like to think there's billionaires in Aspen that are just going to take care of these problems for us. But the fact of the matter is that people who support their neighbors are people who maybe once upon a time were in need of food themselves or understand the problem. And so that's basically the center of our donor base. And we think that the primary reason for this arrow going down is because they're under pressure as well. They're the same ones dealing with high rents, with high housing prices and so forth. That is a perfect storm. I'm not going to take you through all this. I think you probably understand it by the way. There's a photograph of the new facility that is just over there on Midland. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to talk to you about this. We came to the realization as a board at the beginning of the year that we were headed down, that we were beginning to operate significantly in the red, and then we needed to take some fairly serious steps towards cutting back and addressing the problem so as to stay viable. We are essentially a key piece of making sure people in this valley stay fed. So these are the things that we have done since the first of the year. As I mentioned, we got rid of the drive-through pantries. We've negotiated a hold on our mortgage for the new distribution center. We've tried to offset costs by pushing more regional food drives. As I mentioned, Jess is an interim director because we are in the midst of needing to restaff and have delayed doing that in order to try to control expenses better. And the last thing we did that I'll mention is we closed the thrift store we were operating over here in the Midland Center in the upstairs level, on which we were paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month in rent and not really making much money. The whole idea was a social enterprise. We could generate a positive cash flow that would go to help feed people, and it wasn't working out that way. So we cut that back. The other thing we did is we've retooled our development efforts. The board, you can see that nice picture of the board there, collectively contributed $63,500 on essentially an emergent basis to try to drive a fundraising effort around that. And I'm happy to tell you we were able to double that with a push about a matching campaign in order to come up with some extra money. So we did raise $137,000 this spring doing that. We're redoubling our grant writing efforts. We have hired a development director. And yes, we are looking to those people in Aspen that have high net worth to help us out with this. But we're also suggesting towns and counties need to think about helping us out with this. And that's partly what I'm here to talk with you about. Here's what's at stake. We have these programs, the 72-hour emergency bags, the extended table, which is doing 17,000 servings a year. We also hand out diapers along with food to people who need it. Those are programs that we may have to cut if we can't find a way to reduce our operating expenses. And we may also decide that we need to close the parachute and rifle thrift stores, which do make money for us right now, but not enough to really justify it. And we may need to close down distribution locations and just use this trailer more in order to distribute food. In the end, our calculation is that in order to get back to a sustainable level, if we don't find a good boost of support, we're going to end up needing to turn away 1 in 3 pantry guests. So we are going to be substantially cutting back into the need that's out there. So what we're out here thinking is that, I'm sorry to be jumping around. I'm really sorry about that. You know, you see the PowerPoint, you think it's a good PowerPoint, and then you mess with it and you try to make it tighter, and then it's not as good because we're slapping around. But here's the fundamental thing we are doing. We have calculated that if we could raise a fund of $2.5 million, that we would be able to pay off the debt we have on the distribution center and thereby have a stable, secure place to have as a distribution hub for the food. We would also be able to eliminate some other smaller debts we have on vehicles and the like, and get to the point where instead of spending money paying interest, we would have the funds that we needed to provide for people with food. That is a one-time request that we are presenting to, as I mentioned, everyone from Aspen and Pitkin County on down to Parachute, and asking you all to think about that. I saw in your work session today that you had a lot of time and effort on affordable housing. And I think probably that's true of most towns and counties in this area at this point. I guess I'm just asking you to try to think about food right next door to housing, right next door to shelter, as something that we've got to have some more support for in order to have a viable community. Because these are not, you know, people living under the bridge. These are people working day in and day out who just can't make ends meet. And I'd like to think that we think about that being a basic human need just as much as housing or clothing or any of those other things. That's pretty much what we have. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any questions.
All right, well, thank you very much for your information and your presentation. It's always good to hear what's going on. I was obviously amazed by what you guys are doing. I guess I didn't know that you guys go into these depths of providing what you can, so this is great. Bringing it back to council for questions. Start with Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I see in this version of the slideshow that we received in advance that you had dropped a few programs here, and one of them was a mortgage payment hold, basically a housing program. Am I interpreting correctly that was kind of a little out of your mission in the first place, and so that was a good move? Or
the mortgage in question, Counselor, is when we bought the distribution hub, we had to borrow money to do it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And we have gone to that lender and asked them if they would give us a 6-month breathing space, and they happen to be a private lender that's supportive of Lift Up, and they're open to the idea of letting us hold off paying rent a mortgage on the note but we're gonna have to catch up, but we've got ourselves a breathing window because of that.
Okay, I misinterpreted the shorthand. That's your own mortgage.
Sure.
Okay, and
by the way, that's the piece we're hoping to eliminate entirely. If we were able to raise this bucket of funds, that's the first thing we would do with it, is pay off that loan so we didn't have the debt service going forward.
thank you. That's my next question. The 2.5 million goal would just catch you up on your current debts and expenses, or would it be some sort of continuing interest generating funding source?
It would eliminate all debt, not just the mortgage on the property, but also some vehicle debt that we have and some smaller debt we have on our 2 locations down in Parachute and Rifle. And it would give us I guess I would call it a reserve, a fund of I think is it 400,000 that's in there? 400,000 of that 2.5 million would be put in the bank, hold it, and try to have some security going forward, so we're not running, you know, right at empty all the time.
And I think my last question is, the city council just a few minutes ago approved a funding contribution to Lift Up as part of its community grants program, less than what you had requested, far less than $2.5 million. Are you asking the city to consider some separate contribution from the one we just approved?
Let me start by saying thank you for accepting the Financial Advisory Board's recommendation on that front. And I know you have a lot of requests of that nature. And I think, yes, this is a request one time on an extraordinary basis to try to get us past this spot and get us to a place that we could be sustainable. It is honestly a problem that's bigger than we can probably handle with the various towns and counties grant programs. And so it is something more and different than that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Counselor Schmall, please.
Is this a relatively new board that is on board now, or I understand your previous director left and has taken a job in Boulder, I believe?
Yes. The board itself, I've been on the board 3 years. I think there's some people, Klaus Coker, I don't know if Klaus is here, who's a Glenwood resident, has been on the board for probably 15 years or much longer than I have. So it's a mix of people, Counselor, that make up the board. But you're correct that we did have our executive director resign at the end of 2024. Good guy called Ivan Jackson. He had been planning to relocate up here once his daughter graduated from high school down in Boulder. And that kept kind of getting pushed back. And honestly, I think it's another victim of the affordable housing situation. He'd been commuting for those number of years up here from Boulder in order to be our executive director. We are now in the search for a replacement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Counselor Solinsky, please.
Do you have an intention to come back to us with a specific ask for this like larger fundraising goal?
I'm learning something about how local governments work, and I understand that it's better to not to make a group like you aware of a situation like this, as opposed to coming in and saying, please give us X. So this is the awareness talk, but yes, there is intention to follow it with a specific request. If you want to know what we have Glenwood Springs kind of hopefully slated for out of that $2.5 million, I can say that number to you. It's $250,000.
You good?
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions from council? Okay, we'll see none. Thank you. Thank you again. Quick question. How full is your bucket?
We have been, let's see, I did one of these in Newcastle last week. You're asking who's signed on? Is that what you're asking?
I'm curious that's the second part of the question. Yes. How much you got and who signed on?
I think it's all still in process, and I don't know that I can say there's any particular, is there one town that's committed?
I can't speak to that.
I believe that they're all sort of, we'll get back to you, conversations at this point.
Okay. So, but you're doing the rounds and you have been to numerous places.
That's right.
We're just stop along the way.
You're a very important stop.
Okay. Excellent. That was another question, but I think it was answered. Great. Well, if I don't see any more questions on our end, is anybody from the public here that'd like to comment quick on this? No, thank you. We'll close that. Thank you very much for being here
Appreciate it very
tonight,
much.
and we'll see you again soon, I assume, with a
Yes,
formal request.
as is so indicated, we will do that.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that was lift up. Moving on to project updates. And before we get into this, is South Canyon supposed to be Southbridge? It is. Okay, so let's change that.
I believe yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Matt, please.
Sure. Where did it go? I got. Not share. That thing. All right, I've succeeded one better than Ryan Gordon, who could not figure out how to share. I'm just kidding. Good evening, council. Ryan would love to be here. He is ill today, so I am taking over for him. I took this slide and made it much smaller. I thought I'd give you kind of the broad update on some of these projects versus kind of going over everything that we're doing in town because it is ridiculous. Quick update on, I think 6th Street is first on the list. If you haven't been over 6th Street today, they paved the first lift on all of 6th Street. So the connections, the main road, everything, some little pieces got a second lift is what I heard by the end of the day. But the main lift of asphalt on the street was paved today. And as weather holds out, we should pave the second lift tomorrow. On Monday, they will be completing a crosswalk on Maple Street. They'll be completing the sidewalk on the whole north side of the project. And then on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they will be doing striping of the parking stalls, installation of the flagstone. It's kind of like the alleyways downtown. It's concrete and it's got a little brick band in them. They actually started that today. They should be working on the next week. And the intention of this moment is to meet our deadline of Friday and have it open. And the previous intention was to have the road open. This intention is it will basically be done. Most of the work will be done on 6th Street. Friday. Next Friday. Sorry, next Friday. Tomorrow we're just finishing paving. So not only have they met the goal of having it open on the 13th, they're actually going to have the majority of it done on the 13th, and then they'll just kind of move off and onto North Landing over there. Questions on 6th Street? I have photos if you want me to try to pull them up.
Sure.
Oh boy. Never should have.
I'd like to see it. I'd like the public to see it too.
Ryan, did you toss them on here? Oh yeah, you did. Stop sharing and then share again. It makes it do it a couple times. Try to blow this up. This is actually standing over towards Pine, looking back the Curioso and back towards the roundabout. You can see all of the curb and gutter is done. All the valley pans are done. All the crosswalks are done. And that's your first lift of asphalt right there. Back. Gotta make this hard.
While you do that, let me ask you a quick question.
Yep.
How is the, what's it called? Green Bucks, Glenwood Green? How is that going?
Would that be a Steve question?
I don't know exactly, but
Okay.
we have been giving out green dollars. I haven't heard one way or the other.
Okay.
It would probably be a
This point.
cheaper question.
Or a DDA, chamber or DDA question? Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to go back to the other version of this. Okay. The next thing on this is Southbridge. It's going to be a pretty short update. Staff did go meet with CDOT. We did discuss the project, the planning, the FIR meeting, and the funding that's coming up that we had talked about previously. It was a productive meeting. Staff needs to put some numbers together and go meet with CDOT one more time before we would really have a good answer for council. So I'm not allowed to have too much of an in-depth conversation on that one at this moment, but good productive meeting. 27th Street Bridge is next on this one. We are still closing it Saturday morning at about 8 a.m. They'll start putting traffic control up probably around 7:30. It'll be a full closure by 8. We were out there sweeping it today, cleaning everything we could. They will power wash the entire bridge and then start caulking it. If it rains, we'll have to stop temporarily, obviously, let it dry. And then Sunday, it's supposed to be nice. We'll actually potentially change our water sealant depending on the time available to us because we need to have it done on Sunday. But from that point, it will still be open on Sunday. It was intended to be open by noon on Sunday afternoon. We'll see how that goes with the weather. Questions on 27th Street Bridge? Blake Avenue. So Blake Avenue has been going along quite nicely, actually. If you've been over there, the intersection of Blake and 23rd is closed. Gould has actually completed an entire water line loop to the east already, and they're several hundred feet down the sewer line. We have a lot of camera work on the sewer line. and we know it has a lot of bellies in it. By the time we got about 200 feet down it, we realized how bad the sewer line actually was exterior wise and how much it went up and down. Super glad that we are replacing it. That project is moving along. The 23rd Street will be closed at Grand Avenue on Monday. I'm going to try to share this one. Okay, this one did pop up. So on Monday, Tuesday will close the intersection of Grand and 23rd. Kind of see it in the corner right there with the hatching on it. It'll be closed Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We're doing water line connections, storm sewer connections, and trenching within that area, kind of get everything moved all the way to the Alpine Bank driveway and a little bit past it. And then you'll see here in the future, the next closure will be just slightly east of that. And then the next closure will be just slightly east of that. We're meeting with Gould tomorrow. You'll see at the same time, there's still a closure at 23rd and Blake Avenue. I would like to have that open basically tomorrow. Latest would be Monday so that there's not two closures on the road at the same time. We'll have to negotiate a little bit, but I think we can make that happen. So this is the detour plan that is being pushed up onto the website. So if anybody has questions on how to get where, there's still a lot of roads open. A lot of them are two-way roads from 24th Street. You can get back to 23rd. So all the businesses are still open. With that water line being taken out of service and us moving the connection over, we're actually going to highline, if anybody knows what that is, the Alpine building and the care facility adjacent to that, which means that we're going to backfeed the whole entire building through the hose bibs basically, so that the buildings still have water out of a fire hydrant. So pretty easy process, but it'll keep all the buildings open while we're doing our work. Questions on 23rd Street?
Councilor Weimer.
Matt, I had a question on 27th Bridge.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any point this week? It's this weekend, right?
This weekend.
Is there going to be any point where that bridge is not usable in case of emergency?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. If somebody needed to get across that bridge, we would just move out of the way and they would just go across the thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we had to, that would not be a problem.
Councilor
Not be ideal.
So I had a resident that lives over on Blake, in the, I think they're townhomes that are kind of behind, the senior facility there.
Mhm.
They said they were promised one lane and they hadn't gotten it yet as of Tuesday. Do they have one lane available to them for egress?
One, I'm not even sure which ones, why they would be closed. The only thing that's closed currently is the intersection of 23rd and Blake.
She keeps asking me, when am I gonna get my one lane? I'm like, I don't know. So I'm assuming, I assumed it was to her home, but maybe it's just like down Blake. Is there any part of Blake that they can't get down?
You cannot go down Blake between 21st and 23rd unless you live on it. We're allowing residents to come in and out and do whatever they need to do. We're keeping the through traffic closed off.
So I think that's the one lane that is there an anticipated time when people who do not live on that part of Blake but need to access it to get to and from?
So the complication is the intersection's closed and the road. So if you want to go around, you got to go to Palmer and you got to do this whole loop or these other fun things. That's probably more of the comment. If we can get the intersection open by Monday, then the sewer work will continue down Blake between 21st and 23rd, but then the intersection's open. So all you have to do is 21st Bennett and then down 23rd. And then it'll be closed at Grant. So then you'll have to go down Blake and down 20. So it's a bit of a mess.
6 in one hand, half dozen in the other.
But that's why we put maps up and we shoot them out to everybody as much as possible. This is what's going to be closed. And as they move down 23rd Street, it won't all be closures chunk by chunk. There will be one ways occasionally, those kinds of things to try to keep traffic moving. I haven't had a whole lot of complaints that I've heard about. So it's just kind of finding your way around the mess.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Matt?
Nope, unless you want to go through this giant list of things we are doing, which you've already seen previously.
We have seen that. And once there's updates, we'll be gladly hear it. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Councilor Zelinski.
Thank you to everybody who voted for that extra .5% because we're getting a lot done.
Oh, I do want to bring up one more thing. I am sorry. Next Monday through the 30th, the BLD project is connecting onto Wolfson Avenue at the top of the hill above Lowe's. So instead of dragging that out for months and months and months, we've rerouted the buses and Mustang and everybody else, and they're just going to close it. And to make it a more effective project, we're throwing a couple of dollars at it from the city and actually doing a large chunk of it instead of just the pieces that were required by code. So it'd be a nice fix of the bumps at the top of that hill. If you've been up that hill recently, it's pretty bad. So that will be closed from this Monday all the way through the 30th, potentially shorter than that, but that's the schedule at this moment.
And obviously there'll be signs on either end.
Lots and lots of
Lots of
detours.
signs. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Matt.
No problem.
Any additional questions from council? No? Anybody from the public have any questions on the updates? Please come forward, state your name, whether you live in a city or not.
Good evening. My name's Lori Chase. I live at 705 Cowden Drive, and
Thank
I've
you.
been suffering from construction, I don't know, trauma. But since the last city council meeting, I want to say 6th Street has moved so fast. It's unbelievable, and we are so happy. I cannot believe these guys are working their butts off, if I can say that publicly, and they're working long hours. I talked to one of the laborers. He said he got to work yesterday at 5:30, got off at 9. My security camera kept on going off, and these guys are working away. I want to say thank you for whoever lit the fire. We're grateful.
All right, thank you. Good to hear. Anybody else about the updates? No, we'll see none. Thank you. Moving on, and I'm wondering if it's okay with legal and management if we flip-flop 8 and 9 and get the railroad out of the way?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because that'll be fairly short. I'm
Okay.
gonna stand it though. Like,
Please
just
do.
Because I have to keep holding the button here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. As you know, the city of Glenwood Springs really took the lead on putting together a group of communities that filed an amicus brief in the Uinta Railway case that was first heard at the DC Circuit. That group was instrumental in getting a very favorable ruling on behalf particularly of those of us kind of in the middle of this rail line. And then most recently, Glenwood spearheaded filing a series of amicus briefs at the U.S. Supreme Court when that case was heard. Just by way of background, for some of you that are newer to this, the Uinta Railway relates to a project that originates in Utah for the production and transport of heavy waxy crude via rail car from Utah to the Gulf for processing down and around in the refineries near New Orleans. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals, in a very favorable ruling, found under NEPA that the STB, who is the entity charged with reviewing this particular action, failed to consider impacts, both upstream and downstream impacts of this project. The reason it was so critical to those of us along the Colorado River, these would be 5 to 10 trains going through on a daily basis. This heavy waxy crude, STB acknowledged in the documents that there would be accidents, and a fair number of them. That's the nature of rail transport. But considering the potential impacts along probably the single most important waterway in the United States, and that it provides drinking water to a good third of the United States, was a fairly critical issue. And so Glenwood, Eagle County is a primary plaintiff in the case, participated in this litigation a little over a week ago, 2 weeks ago now. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled on that case in what we would call really a plurality decision, majority of 5 justices, 3 concurring, but for different reasons, with Supreme Court Justice Gorsuch recusing himself because of some ties that he had to some of the litigants on the amicus side. It came down with a ruling that overturned a fair portion of the DC Circuit Court of Appeals decision, primarily related to the scope of the NEPA investigation and report. The majority effectively ruled that significant deference should be given to the agency as to the scope of the NEPA analysis. The concurring opinion was interesting in that it more focused on the authority of the STB to conduct that investigation, whether that the scope matched up with the STB's sort of organic statute that created it. I think it's unfortunate because I think Sotomayor, who wrote that concurring opinion, I think got it wrong in terms of the authority. And that was a little bit based on some of the arguments that were heard and briefing in front of the court. But in any case, where does that leave us today? So it's going back down to the DC Circuit Court for further direction. We'll ultimately go back to the trial court for final orders. I think where we're really at is that functionally for a lot of the claims that Eagle County made, those are still live. Claims related to the STB's investigation underneath its independent authority regarding the risks on this rail line that still need to be resolved, as well as some ongoing Clean Water Act issues that still need to be resolved at the trial court. So essentially, while you did see a lot of press that this was kind of the end of NEPA as we know it, which it may be to some extent, as it relates specifically to the fight that we are engaged in to protect the Colorado River, in particular, I think we still have some tools in our tool bag. We continue to interface closely with Eagle County and their team, their legal team, on choices and solutions that we might be able to find along the way here. It's not, as with most U.S. Supreme Court cases, there is no absolute winner and absolute loser, if you will. It is always very nuanced. And so that's really where we're at. I'm happy to answer questions. A lot of it is a little bit of insider baseball, I guess you would say, for those of us inside the law. But I think the takeaway that I would say is that while the opinion was not favorable, it really didn't address directly the issues that we raised on our amicus, and didn't take a negative approach by not addressing them, didn't negatively impact them. And really, one of the primary things we wanted to talk about and wanted to bring to that was the importance in these analyses of local involvement, because oftentimes as a local entity, you have very little impact on these large projects that are being reviewed by large federal agencies, and they can kind of steamroll you. And the one thing that NEPA does provide for us is the opportunity to interact with that agency and to comment and to have our voices heard, which is why in so many instances there are, if you think about everything from the Gross Reservoir expansion over on the Front Range and that trans-basin diversion, we wouldn't be in as good a position dealing with the Front Range on those issues had we not had the leverage of NEPA to allow us to engage in the conversation about what those impacts would be. And so there are a lot of examples throughout the West that look like that. For us, incredibly important. And so we didn't lose any of that specifically. We're going to have to see how over the course of time this decision plays out. But I don't want to stand up here and say that it was a complete loss. It certainly was not what we had hoped in terms of an outcome. We hoped our issues would be addressed favorably by the U.S. Supreme Court. But that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. Good update. Councillor Weimer for first questions.
I agree with the power of NEPA. I thought it was just so cool that we were, in a sense, in front of the Supreme Court of the United States, at least to get our day in court. That was like super cool. So
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And
Absolutely.
you were kind of a big deal in that process. So thank you.
Yeah, and I really have to, call out Richard Peterson Crummer in my office, who did a lot of the legwork on organizing, wrote a lot of the press releases that you guys, saw that we put out, provided background to the press on a lot of the issues as well. So I am really fortunate to have a really great team at my firm to work on these issues. So thank you.
Outside of the legal realm, is it an option for these guys, or is it an option for us to ask them or force them or somehow persuade them to go north up to the I-80 corridor?
Yeah, I think that I don't know that we have necessarily the direct leverage to do that, but certainly continuing to engage, continuing to support Eagle County and trying to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because absolutely, from the standpoint, I mean, it is a unique situation what a high risk there is to the Colorado River. And keeping in mind that this set of tracks runs along the Colorado River for a very long way. Yes. And when you think about the fact that, one of the participants in this brief was Grand County, who you traditionally would not think would be in opposition to, kind of an extractive sort of approach. Like that's just not who they are typically. And they were very adamant because they've worked for years to protect the upper reaches of the Colorado River. And, this was putting that directly at risk.
Thank you. Counselor Schachter.
Carl, is there anything more we have to do as a council in support of this in Eagle at this point?
I don't think so. We're going to, it's going to be interesting to see when it goes back down to the DC circuit, and then it'll drop down again to the trial court. At this point, I don't think so. We continue, like I said, to engage regularly with Eagle County and their legal team, who are really leading the fight on this. And I don't know if you saw the press coverage where they're saying essentially what I'm saying is that there's still a number of live claims that we need to deal with. And so it may be in a couple of years that we're back up on appeal on some other issues. And I'll be standing in front of you and saying, this is the time for us to jump back in on an amicus brief in support of, our brethren, local governments.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions? No, we'll see none. Thank you. Anybody from the public have any questions on the railway? We'll see none. We'll close it. Thank you, Carl.
Okay. I'm just going to keep standing
You're
here.
going to keep standing there? All right, let's move into number 9 now, discussion regarding the unhoused population.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna grab my computer. I wanna do a little framing before we get into Q&A, which I think is gonna be primarily what we're doing tonight.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna project anything, I just took notes, and of course my computer logged me out, so. All right, so I just wanted to kind of frame this up as we open this discussion, because I think it's important that you understand the legal framework that we are required to operate within. And you're going to be asking the chief and myself and the assistant chief a lot of questions, I think, and I want to frame that up first so that we're not doing it kind of haphazardly. From an initial standpoint, two things. One is that I have stood in front of council about every 2 years, every time there's a new council elected, going back to 2000, and had some variation of a conversation about this issue. It has been with the city of Glenwood Springs and with our communities for a very long time. And so I respect the fact that it is always hard. And 20 years ago, I stood up here with then Chief Wilson and in probably 2001, and had the first of many conversations in my career around this. So it's been here, and it's been a struggle to address the issue, both on a social and a law enforcement side, for a long time. So as an initial matter to frame up, how enforcement can occur, is that it's very clear underneath the U.S. Constitution and the cases that have been decided that we cannot enforce based on status. We can only enforce based on conduct. And what that means is that we can't enforce because of your race or your religion, or whether or not you own a home, have a home, or have a place to stay that is something different than the streets or staying on BLM ground. So we have to address conduct, not status. And so that really frames up a lot of everybody gets treated the same. When these guys are out there looking at violations, whether it's a tourist or whether it's somebody who is unhoused, it's the conduct that we have to focus on and not the status of that individual. So last year, these guys ran about 25,000 calls. Of those, 400 to 600 involved our unhoused population. So a little less than 2%, or around 2%. I don't do math, but so that just kind of gives you both the scope of what these guys are doing, and also as it relates to everything else going on in town. I think, and I'll have either the assistant chief or the chief talk about specific violations, but probably the conduct that we most often see are disorderly conduct, illegal camping, Public intoxication, but it's not actually illegal to be publicly intoxicated, only if you're a risk to yourself or somebody else. Littering, and then trespass if individuals are on private property. And I should probably note on trespass, much different than, say, if you are an HOA board or something like that. Public property, you can't really be a trespasser on public property, right? Unless we have specifically the property excluded to all of the public. Trespass isn't one of the charges that we have available to us in a public right of way, in a park, on city-owned land, unless it is being there is prohibited either at that time or nobody is allowed on the property. A good example would be, say, the water or wastewater plant. We could trespass there. So a couple of other things. Colorado has adopted a number of statutes and regulations regarding how our court systems deal with the indigent population. And consistent with U.S. Supreme Court law on the matter, your inability to pay is not a crime in and of itself, in the sense that incarceration is not a choice that you can make as a judge sentencing. If somebody can't pay the fine, we don't have debtor prisons, right? That is something that has kind of come and gone. And in Colorado, specifically, the courts are required to look at alternatives to incarceration if a indigent defendant and we're talking about the low level. I mean, these offenses underneath the municipal code are very low level, setting aside felonies and things like that. They're required to look at alternatives to incarceration if the defendant can't pay. And the other thing that you need to be aware of is that if jail time is, or incarceration is, a potential penalty, we are required in municipal court to provide a public defender to anyone who is determined qualified for that, anybody who is indigent. We are required to provide a public defender for. So there are a number of things going on there that impact sort of how our courts deal with people, what the expectation is when anybody is in front of the municipal court judge. We also, and these guys can speak to the use of the jail and housing and things like that. When we do pick up somebody and arrest them, if we do, if we arrest and we were going to lodge, municipal court judge is also required to review that if they're picked up on a charge lodged in the jail, required to review within 48 hours. And there again, for most of these low-level offenses, even if we lodge, the judge is not going to require a cash bond to get out. The judge is probably going to require what we call a PR bond, personal recognizance, because they don't have any other ability to pay. And at that point in time, they're not convicted of any crime. And Colorado and the U.S. Supreme Court and the federal courts have been very clear that the fact that you can't pay to get yourself out of jail prior to conviction is not something that the legal system wants to have happen, right? You haven't been convicted of anything. And so the fact that we have you locked up simply because you can't pay your way out prior to even a determination of your guilt is something that we try to avoid. So with that, I don't know if these guys, if you want to add anything.
Just on the heels of that, we've had a number of conversations with the sheriff under the guidelines of the city attorney just mentioned to you about when we can, when we cannot put people in jail. Typically, when we do that, it's to break a cycle or a situation that's evolving right at that moment. And then they're released soon afterwards and no longer than that 48-hour period with a citation or a PR bond that he just mentioned. So we've had a number of events in our community since I've been here where there have been what we would call violent crimes, an assaultive behavior, batteries, things like that, right in a high profile area, right under the bridge. In fact, one of our local businesses recently, and the community was very upset about us not removing that person from that situation and putting them in jail. And that's the reason for that is because exactly what he was just describing to you, some of these parameters that the courts have outlined for us. So essentially a person like that gets a citation and then we leave. We don't have the opportunity to put them in a car and drive them down to the south end of town or out to the west side or anywhere else. We just have to give them their citation and then we move on and let the courts adjudicate that problem a little bit later on. That particular event, the person returned and then had continuing assaultive behavior, so then they had to be lodged in the jail for a different set of circumstances. With respect to under the bridge, that, the way I understand it, and Carl can speak to this a little better than I can, that's part of the CDOT right-of-way. So it is Glenwood Springs property or our sphere of influence there, but we do have a little bit of limitation in that particular place there with enforcement. The jail typically only wants to accept people who are, and Colorado law allows for, violent offenders, you know, robbers, murderers, things, you know, sexual assaults, things like that. Really anything lower than that we would call it infraction or lower than a misdemeanor. Some of the public nuisance crimes that we're talking about, like some of you seen some photographs recently over the weekend. So I understand that it might be unsightly and it can affect our tourism and our visitors and consumers or patrons in our business district. And I live here and I have children that want to go have ice cream too. That notwithstanding, they do have certain legal rights. So where we can, we go and contact them maybe and find out if they're okay, calls permitting. We do have a heavy call volume. So when we have the opportunity, we will go and check on them and find out if there's a warrant for the person's arrest maybe, or there's some other situation they might have contraband on them that we can make an arrest for outside of that vagrancy situation and then remove them from there. Otherwise, we have a number of tools, but we're very, very limited on how we can do that, primarily for the reasons that Carl just mentioned to you. And then lastly, I would say that I've offered to every counselor since I've been here to come contact me and we can arrange for you to come out with us on the street and you can find out what that call volume looks like, those contacts look like with these individuals and some of the limitations that we're faced with when we need to put somebody in jail and we not necessarily can. Really to the dismay of the community, I think it's really just a lack of education. People just don't understand how we are limited. And given all the resources we do have, but we still have to work with within the confines of the Constitution and people's constitutional and civil rights.
And then the next thing I was just going to hop to, just kind of by way of background. So within Glenwood Springs, well, let me back up. 2019, there was a fairly important case that was heard and decided in the Ninth Circuit called the Grants Pass case. You'll hear a lot of us kind of shorthand to that. And in response to that case, it basically said, look, it's, you know, if Grants Pass said, if somebody doesn't have any place else to go and they are, say, sleeping in public, that you can't criminalize that behavior when they don't have a choice, that it's a violation underneath the Eighth Amendment for cruel and unusual punishment. As a result of that, we took an approach here in Glenwood Springs to define some particular areas where camping is prohibited in terms of our kind of core business district and things like that. Recognizing that at least at that time underneath Grants Pass, we needed to make sure that there were places where people could rest, if you will, that weren't completely inaccessible, right? So more recently, that case was overturned by the Supreme Court. They didn't really provide us a ton of guidance, but saying essentially, there again, as long as you are focused on conduct and not status, there is not an Eighth Amendment violation of cruel and unusual punishment. That's fairly recently that case was overturned. We're really not sure where that is going to take us. Where this comes up most frequently is the other big issue that we struggle with a lot here in town, which is the encampments, both on either city-owned or non-city-owned property around our community, right? And so after the Grants Pass case in 2019, most jurisdictions, and we still subscribe to this, hold to a 72-hour notice rule, right? Because this is people's private property that is there, posting notice saying that you need to remove the encampment within 72 hours or else we're going to take that personal property. We need to impound it, obviously, because we can't just take it and throw it in the garbage unless we deem it abandoned. Post the overturn of Grants Pass, a lot of communities are changing that time period. They're shortening it up to 24 to 48 hours of notice. Aurora is taking a very aggressive approach, and Aurora makes a lot of bad law in Colorado sometimes because they have a tendency to take the most aggressive approaches on things, which is they're taking a no-notice approach. They just come in with a sweep, grab everybody's stuff, take it down to an impound facility, and call it a day. I'm fairly confident in other states that has been challenged, and those lawsuits are ongoing. I would suggest that is maybe a little too aggressive. And I always hate being the the poster child for, you know, new law in Colorado. We also have a very, a legislature that's very interested in kind of finding the right balance. And so I think Aurora is going to probably prompt some legislation at the next legislative session regarding notice and how, at least for the state of Colorado, you deal with removal of those encampments. The last thing I would say on that is that I think, Steve, what's the number? About $100,000 currently that we have budgeted for the removal and cleanup of encampments. And my guess is that's probably not going to be enough this year. And we usually exceed whatever we budget. So with that, I think everybody here, including Steve, is happy to answer any questions. There again, I wanted to frame all that up, not to say that it's not important or we can't do anything different, but just so you guys understand from our standpoint, sort of the limitations that we have to operate in on at least the enforcement side, and how to address this stuff. Oh, sure.
I'd like to conclude with one thing. I'm aware of, or we're aware of other programs around Colorado, particularly in Durango, in LaPlatte County, I believe. Is that county down there? I'm sorry. LaPlatte, thank you. And so we had reached out to them about 18 months ago, 24 months ago, and asked them about how that program was working for them. And the law enforcement officials there said, absolutely do not touch this. You don't want anything to do with this program, because immediately after its inception, they started having sexual assaults, homicides, stabbings, very serious violent felonies occurring inside that place, where they've had to dedicate a team of officers just to patrol that one particular location. And that came initially to the tune of $400,000. On top of that, and referring to what Carl had mentioned about the storing and property and things associated to encampments, we don't have the facilities to do that. And so when we do go and eradicate or remove a camp from wherever it might be, we use the Parks Department, streets personnel. But then we find a lot of things are soiled, you know, mattresses or whatever. We have to destroy those. We cannot keep that material in-house. And again, we just don't have the facilities for that currently. So there's a significant cost associated to those things, or particularly when you're talking about designated camping areas or resort or rest areas or whatever we want to call that, with the crime that was attached to the program that we found in Durango as a pilot model. So with that, then I would submit that if you have any questions or comments, we're happy to talk about that.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for the background and the update on all this. So back to us for questions, and we'll start with Councillor Weimer, please.
I'm just curious, what was the impetus for having this conversation today?
I think a couple of the new counselors really wanted to kind of hear, you know, kind of how the city handled it, what was going on, you know, what our options were, and I think maybe have some ideas of their own of how it should be being dealt with.
I just wasn't sure if there was some recent activity or something that drove this.
I mean, I would say I don't know if it's recent, but I think it's just the ongoing activity.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Councillor Townsley.
Just what, you know, I realize your guys' hands are tied on a lot of this stuff too, but how are we looking at this? You know, when you look at people camped up in the oak brush and we get a really hot summer from a fire standpoint, I mean, there's issues of vagrancy, all these other things like that, but just as a danger to the entire town, it seems to me like that.
It absolutely, without question, it is. And, you know, one of the biggest things, and Assistant Chief Hassel can probably speak to this the best operationally, but we move an encampment, it pops up someplace else. We move an encampment, it pops up someplace else. It absolutely is a problem. It is a huge concern and worry for our fire department, for our residents, for our, you know, for our entire team around that, without question. Trying to, you know, we continue to try to clean up when we can. You know, and there again, I'm not the money guy, so I can't really address how much of the resources that are allocated to do that or when. We also have a tough thing in that we are also surrounded by a large swaths of BLM ground, and of course, as you guys know, as public land users on BLM, you can camp in any location for up to 14 days, and so we do have that interface in addition to the privately owned or city-owned land that folks might have these encampments on. Absolutely, it's a deep concern for us.
Are we pushing back when you say, okay, Denver's, you know, state government's looking at going, okay, let's, you know, we've got a lot of leeway because, you know, we want to be the nice people or whatever. Are we pushing back and going, you guys won't give us fire resources, so you want us to deal with this how? maybe is that a tack that we're pushing back on the state government?
Yeah, and I will say that, by way of example, like I sit on behalf of a couple of the municipalities I represent, the CML Policy Committee. Every year we talk in depth about new legislation aimed at both one, expanding the enforcement ability and kind of removing some of those things that are tying our hands in municipal courts in particular. That's an area we push back on without question. On the resource allocation, in terms of, statewide firefighting, Chief could maybe speak to that more as from the fire department standpoint. Honestly, I think we're probably more dependent on federal resources and state resources when we get right down to it, on those large scale events. But
Yeah, briefly on that one, the state doesn't have a very large or robust fire department or fire service at the state level. Primarily in this region particularly, we would rely on the federal fire partners. The unfortunate circumstance there is they've been cut back significantly in the last 6 months. And so their staff has been reduced substantially, which will create a significant problem for us should we have a wildland fire here, because those resources then are allocated to other places around the country that are having wildfires just like we are. So we're really kind of in a very precarious situation right now with very limited federal resources. So when something's going to happen here, it really is going to come down to us relying on our Garfield County or Eagle County partners to come try and assist us the best that they can.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Zelinski.
So one of the things that caught my attention looking at the city of Durango, when you go to their homelessness site, they have some really clearly defined kind of standards. What is and is not allowed. And it does sound sort of contradictory to what I have found, heard is unenforceable in our community. And so I was curious about how actionable that is, because it looks good on paper. And so and it's really impressive. And I didn't know if that's only because they have other housing options, or is there anything, or is this just something that looks good on paper?
I could make a page with our enforcement options that looks just like that. I went to the Durango page, and it looks fantastic. The reality is, it looks fantastic on that webpage. They struggle with the same enforcement issues, and they're facing the same constitutional limits. And I would suggest that they have sort of an anti-sheltering provision. I don't know if you noticed that on their
Yep, I did.
And I've got to tell you that from the standpoint as your legal counsel, that looks a lot like a vagrancy ordinance, the sheltering. I don't know how it clearly is, to me, is directed at status, not conduct. Because as I read their ordinance, a tourist sitting under the 7th Street Bridge to get out of the sun would violate the sheltering ordinance. And so when you have something like that, it does two things. It makes it very hard for these guys to enforce, and it makes it a very high risk ticket to write, because if there's a pattern that, tourists aren't getting them, but people who don't, maybe look as good as a tourist are getting them, that's a real problem. So my take on that is that it's a great, really nice looking web page. They're facing the same enforcement problems. And I will tell you, I had a CAST conference in Durango, I don't know, last fall, I think October. And I will tell you, walking from downtown over to our hotel at 10:30 at night, I would tell you that, the same discomfort that we have here was occurring there with, lots of folks out soliciting, lots of uncomfortable contacts in that 3/4 of a mile walk between downtown and where the hotel was. So I don't know that it's on the ground any more effective than we are here.
So for me, my concern is less about, the guy under the bridge, it doesn't bother me. I have been dealing with that since the day I moved to Glenwood. I ran a bar downtown. That's not, my business backs up to the library where most folks hang out. And that doesn't make me as uncomfortable. Where I am struggling is with these established encampments on city property. And that's what I'm looking at going, the no camping on the property and things can we start with that at least? which, you know, it might push people just out to this BLM land, but at least it's not right there.
Yeah. And actually, I think that, you know, that is the case that we have, you know, on most of those wide swaths of land, I think we have no camping up, don't we? I think it's just a matter of allocating resources, and
I know.
that's something, if you guys want to allocate those resources, we can go out and move encampments. And, you know, this is a year when, there again, I don't have to worry about where it comes from, but you know, from my standpoint, this is going to be a fire season, that doing that is incredibly important probably. And so it may be a place where you guys may want to allocate more resources, but I'll leave that to Steve, because that's really his, you know, his bailiwick.
So from where I sit, and I'm just one of 7, but it would be important for me to understand how big of, like, how much resources that would require from a cost standpoint. Can we get drones to like see where these people are? You know, like what can we do? What kind of a proposal does that look like? And how can we manage that? I feel like that to me is a little bit more important than just feeling a little uncomfortable because somebody looks different.
Yeah, and I think
The short
Yeah,
answer to
go
that,
ahead.
yes.
Yeah.
Right, we have those assets to do that. It's just a matter of redirecting. some of those staff
Prioritizing
that
it,
they have.
yeah. And so that if I could just understand like what would be the downside of that? You know, what are the things would have to get ignored in order to make that happen? You know, and is it like basically a cost benefit kind of a thing?
Yeah, so one thing that Chief Darris mentioned was to encourage really any or all of you guys to come right along with us. Just the other day, I walked the railroad tracks, which is actual property of the Hot Springs Pool. And I came across, I think, 6 encampments, 2 which were very, very large. That'll probably cost in the thousands to have removed. That will probably fall in the pool. We'll see where that lands. But I would recommend, even as a group, to go out and check out some of these locations. We can fly it with a drone and you can see, but you don't understand the impact until you're right on top of it.
I've been to a few, I hear you, and we saw some, we have an acquaintance that sent us some photographs, you know, because he was looking for some personal property that went missing, and it's stunning. I was stunned.
One of the things I should have mentioned from the outset is that I'd like you guys to appreciate that the vast majority of these folks that we're dealing with are choosing this lifestyle.
I understand.
That is not necessarily, they're not victims of circumstance. Those people that are in a tight spot, we have resources and things that we can do to get them to a shelter. We have tokens, arrangements with other hotels, whatever. We can house them temporarily, get them to lift up or Catholic Church, whoever it might be, faith-based organizations. But the vast majority, I mean, probably in the 90s percentile, are people that are choosing that. And so when we go out there and we try to give them, offer them resource, they want nothing to do with it. They're substance abusers and they're, you know, whatever the circumstance might be. And they'll flat out tell you, I've been there, done that. I have no use for that. Leave me alone. And they just want to, you know, continue in that behavior. And so for those people, that's where a real challenge is at. We can't get them anywhere, try to rectify the situation that they find themselves in. In particular to your comment earlier about the wildland fires, some of these, or a lot of these places are outside the city limits. And so then we rely on the sheriff's office to go out there and address it, in particular Walmart. Everybody's familiar with that one. But we have a number of those in the area that are right on the county city limit border. And so they also are resource limited. You know, we're applying, sending deputies out to deal with those. And we can't certainly control that, but that's absolutely a problem because that is a very high risk fire danger area that we'd like to address. More municipal, kind of in our little urban area here, it's a little bit easier for us to control the fire piece of that. Beyond that, it's absolutely valuable. Again, the overriding thing is most concerning is that choice of people are really creating problems.
So with that being said, is there, you don't want to stay where it's not comfortable and convenient to stay. Is there a community choice that we are making, or is this just how those decisions are made on that side of things? Like, are there resources or things here? Is there something unique about Glenwood that's making us more desirable for people to camp up here, or is?
You know, here's what I would say is that, I mean, we do have a number of services. Most communities frankly do.
Understood.
I think the thing that makes us unique and why this has always been an ongoing issue here as compared to farther up valley, or even farther down valley, down the Colorado River. we have a large tourist population. We're on an interstate. We have good transit within the community. And just because of the way the layout of the valley is here, it's fairly easy to move from, camping just outside of town to coming into town, to solicit for funds, to moving back out. A number of those things, it's just kind of a number of things. I think it's also the same reason why Durango struggles. Durango struggles a lot because they have a very large homeless vet population in Durango for a variety of reasons. But I think it's why you see communities like Durango or our community really struggle with this, is because, both geography and temperature and access to a large tourist population.
So it's really not something we're choosing, it's just our nature.
I think a lot of it is, and we can, increasingly within the bounds of the law, make it uncomfortable. But I think Glenwood will always be attractive for the same reasons it's attractive to everybody who comes here, right? Like, if you're going to pick a place to hang out, Glenwood is a pretty good place to hang out, right? Like, a little bit of a victim of our own success.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Schachter.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of this. My inclination would be to be more aggressive than we have been, to whatever extent.
May I interrupt? Let's do questions at this point. Because I want to open it to the public, and then if we have other
sorry.
comments, then we can.
So in terms of potential cleanup, we have some dollars allocated already, maybe not all the resources. And is it possible to get a release from Garfield County? Should they say, we don't have the resources, you guys can go in there? Is that also legally possible?
Absolutely, from the standpoint of cleanup. Enforcement is always a little more
No,
complicated.
I'm talking
but
about,
yeah, Garfield County oftentimes, and I think over the years, they're more resource limited than we are. I want to say, how many years ago was it that we partnered on cleaning up behind the Osborne? Yeah, about 3 years ago, we did a major cleanup on the
Right.
property jointly.
so we,
Yes.
so we can do it with
we
their
do that on a
permission.
regular basis, or can do it on a regular basis.
The next question, Carl, based on some of these pictures we've seen, in your opinion, given some of the public safety and health issues there, is there any reason to impound this as opposed to getting it out of the way and destroyed?
Yeah, we primarily wind up, the things that are hazardous get destroyed. We posted a notice, it gets abandoned. You try to focus on things that you can identify as distinct personal property for a couple of reasons. One is because if people come back for it, we have an interaction where we can potentially cite for that. So I think that a lot of times, if it is hazardous, it gets destroyed. It is the things that are, personal property that we struggle a little bit more with. What's the right line on what do we keep, what do we not keep? So there again, it's kind of a case by case, but I think, the vast majority of stuff winds up going to the dump, frankly, and being dealt with as hazardous. A lot of hazardous waste, both, human waste, drug paraphernalia.
When they're intermingled, can you separate them safely?
Probably not, which is also one of the reasons why cleanup is expensive, is because you essentially have to send in a hazmat crew to clean these sites up.
And relate, no comments, but question with a little comment. I was generally, I don't think our downtown area and under the bridge is particularly bad compared to a lot of areas I've seen. I was a little shocked this week by the single incident, sleeping by the elevators first early in the morning and then under the bridge. Is there a Durango type, if we don't already have one, is there a Durango type of ordinance we can pass that doesn't lead to jail time or citation, but empowers enforcement to say, you got to get out of here. You got to move to that park, or you got to move out of here.
No, we do. We have a no camping.
Okay.
It is in that instance, and these guys can speak more to, it's where does it fall in the 25,000 calls for service a year?
Okay.
Right? Like that's really, that's part of it, because I, from your neighborhood, walk through your neighborhood now a lot. And then, oftentimes you do have the guy that's sleeping next to the elevators every morning.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Schmal, please.
Carl or John or Chief, how many encampments have we found on BLM property?
I don't know that we have a specific number on BLM. We try to search through within the city limits. I can probably give you a rough estimate. The problem is we have a group of transients that live here and they start in one area, and then when it gets too messy, they move it somewhere else, or we notice them and they move 100 feet down the road. We come in, we clean it up, and then they move right back. So we have, I mean, there could be dozens and dozens throughout the city. A lot of them run together because a lot of them will stay together. But as far as BLM, I don't think we would have that data. Yeah, we don't have that opportunity.
I understand they could move up and camp legally on BLM land for 14 days, but in reality, that's not what's happened.
We might not necessarily know that because we don't patrol that area. We would have. Chief. Thank you. Just. Sure. Say it again. We might not have the opportunity to know that information because we don't have really any legal right to be out in enforcing BLM property to begin with. So we're really relegated to within the city limits.
Okay. How much of the last cleanup was actually reclaimed by anybody?
I would say extremely negligible, probably zero. We have to be very careful though, because what we're concerned about is the one time we do that, and hey, I had a $50,000 watch in there or whatever, and they come and bring a claim against the city. That's hard for us to defend. So to date, I would say it's extraordinarily low, maybe a few, if that.
Mm-hmm. We had some kind of a private security patrol working downtown that was contracted a year or 2 years ago. Was there any effect from that was positive or negative?
Thank you for that option. I was going to say we had an effect, but it was negative in nature. And I don't want to put any, throw any shade or anything toward that particular company, but it was highly ineffective. And I think the budget at that time was 50,000, 75,000, something like that for that service. And we were having some troubles with some of their personnel directly committing crimes or being part of the problem. And so what we did was we redirected our patrol staff and had them going down on foot patrols at least once a shift per officer every single day of the week, calls permitting, to go down there and provide that police presence. And so then we reclaimed that budgeted money and returned it back to the city's general fund.
I also suspect that the cost of the cleanup is somewhat relative to the amount of time that we ignore it and let the problem build up.
That is correct. The longer we wait, the worse it gets.
So that's something that needs constant attention. Okay, one more question then. I'd like to know what you folks need from us to give it the constant attention that it deserves to keep it from becoming the hazard that it becomes when we don't give it the attention. Not necessarily right now, but soon.
Big question.
Whether it's ordinances, whether it's money, whether it's patrol, what do you need? Let us know.
The unfortunate and stark reality of that, if I had a magic wand, I would say absolutely we could dedicate a couple of officers to that, much like a school resource officer, right? Dedicated to the school. 1 or 2 or 3 officers dedicated to a team that would just deal with this, to include mental health referrals and all of those kinds of things, right? But as it is right now, we're carrying 2 or 3 officer vacancies and have had since I've been here. So it's a difficult problem for us to bring in people into the law enforcement field. So if we could, wave a wand, I would say additional funding to support a couple of officers, increase the staffing to do that. So we can't get the officers and fill the vacancies we currently have. And once we did accomplish that, if that was a priority of the council, and through the city manager's office, we would work to identify them and put them on a special detail.
I encourage you to think a little creatively too, that maybe it's not a full-blown officer, maybe it's I don't know if they're Cub Scout officers that can advise when attention is needed. this part of this council is interested in addressing the problem.
Yeah, and I think the one that is gonna take us a little bit more time, and I think, part of it is kind of, Matt and his team, as well as the chief and his team and Steve, is how much the dollar value to allocate towards a really aggressive cleanup and consistent, constant sort of activity on that level. I think that's something that's gonna take us a little time to figure out. But absolutely, we can figure out what that number would look like, but I do think that's the one piece that is in motion too. It's just how do we determine what the right amount is? So we can work on it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Townsley.
Thank you. Two questions. Is there anything that we can do ordinance wise as far as soliciting, making that either discouraging it or making it illegal?
Well, can't make it illegal. It's a First Amendment right.
I know. I don't know
yeah,
the right,
no,
I don't know the right word.
yeah.
How do we discourage it?
Right. No, it is. So I will tell you that there's a line that it crosses when it becomes aggressive, and people feel, they're in fear. That line is pretty hard to get up to be honest with you, underneath the First Amendment. The other piece of that you have to do is you have to have a complainant that is willing to file that complaint and is willing to come to court and testify, right? So that's always been, putting on my prosecutor hat from having prosecuted in the Muni court over the years. That's probably the hardest piece of that one on solicitation. We were pretty creative up until some of the legal changes in the late, 2015 to 2020. Probably can't be quite that creative in terms of, where if we can find a legitimate safety or health reason to bar solicitation or any speech in a particular area. And so I'll use by example, at one point, we had an ordinance that didn't allow solicitation within 100 feet of an intersection. Keeping in mind that meant that you couldn't be out there with your sandwich board that says high school, out on the corner on 14th. You couldn't be out there with a sign that said car wash when the football team was raising money to go to state, right? You couldn't do any kind of solicitation or speech within 100 feet of that. I think where the current case law is on those kinds of issues, I'm not comfortable suggesting we go back to that style of ordinance. And so honestly, I think right now we have about as good as it gets for the most part. I'll give it some more thought, but there's not a lot of other areas to focus on because we can't ban the behavior entirely. And keeping in mind that solicitation is somebody coming into your business and saying, hey, do you want to donate to Lift Up? Or do you want to donate to the Demon football team? That's solicitation too, right? So there again, from our standpoint, we try to be thoughtful about, again, conduct, not status. So
it would seem just, watching people around town, they love stoplights because that's where they get people to stop. So is it a possibility maybe you don't make all intersections, but places you have stoplights? Just a thought.
Yeah, potentially. And that's something with the overturning of Grants Pass, it might be something to look at again. I think the parameter is as long as they're not impeding or creating a safety hazard, and we have to be able to articulate and defend that it is creating a safety hazard to have them at that location. I think that's a possibility.
And then my last question is more, you guys have dealt with this, you've seen it, you talk to your contemporaries about it and whatnot. What else can we do to the city to make it less attractive to these people to be here? I mean, if it's, I don't know what somebody had mentioned something about blaring horns and lights. Not to that extreme, but are there other things that we can do that make us where somebody goes, let's go somewhere else. This is just an uncomfortable, we don't like it here.
So both Chief Dearest and I attended an academy that we met with 250 other leaders in law enforcement throughout the world. We had them from other countries, from other cities, major cities, Miami, Detroit, New York. We all have the same problem. And the bigger the city, the more the problem. So they don't really have any magic thing that does to deter solicitation or camping or encampments or just vagrancy in general. if there was any place on the planet, that would be the place that we would have found a solution to.
And then Steve, last question to you. Is there anything that we can do from a public program, anything, it's like, okay, slow down in Glenwood, quit feeding the birds in Glenwood, quit feeding the wildlife, quit giving these people money? Is there anything that we'd have appetite for as a council or a city, or is that just too far out down the road to say, if you guys want to encourage this, then this is what you're going to live with. If you don't want to encourage it, it may lessen the problem.
Yeah, we can revisit that again. We've taken a little bit
Tried
of a
that.
stab at that, and it's a little bit of a fine line you've got to walk, because some of the things that we really shouldn't be doing are things that, people really want to do.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
If I could comment on that for just a second.
Yeah.
Grand Junction tried this similar system. They had signs up. I forgot what the verbiage was, but essentially it's handouts are not handouts. They're creating problems, and don't give money to panhandlers. It got to a point that people were taking pictures of transients next to these signs, collecting money, and it was very, very ineffective for the city of Grand Junction. They've since pulled down, I think, all their signs.
Okay, Counselor Zelinski.
So is there any value, do you believe that there would be value in? I'm more interested in like, okay, so we've had people who live outside of traditional bounds since the day I moved to Glenwood, and that's never changed and it's not going to change. Is there any action that you foresee, like if we had some sort of a trash program, like would rather than moving in an encampment when it gets too gross, would they just maybe keep it less gross if we gave them the means to do so? You can roll your eyes. I'm just asking.
No, I'm not. I'm sorry.
All right, sorry my periphery, but I was like, because I'm kind of like, I'm that person that like, I'm like, I believe in the best in people. And I think, is this a lifestyle choice that really is so dismissive of traditional ways of doing things that we wouldn't get paid?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of the latter, right? I mean, and I do think that, there's gradients to everything. I think you probably are gonna find people who would take advantage of that. And you're gonna find a lot of people who wouldn't take advantage of that. I mean, I know working in a lot of mountain towns, there are a lot of full-time employees that choose to live on BLM or Forest Service land all summer long because
I looked into that. I was gonna do that because I was like, I want to go travel and I'm gonna save money.
no,
I'm gonna camp
and it's
move every 2 weeks.
in a community like ours.
But I wouldn't have like left my trash when I moved.
Right,
So
now,
there's,
that's what I mean. So I think, I guess where I was going with that is that I think the people that would do that are probably doing that are choosing that alternative lifestyle. I mean, I can't say that's 100%, but I think our experience would be that's probably the case.
Counselor Schachter.
Two questions. One, and I don't know exactly, I probably should where our city boundaries are, but particularly, and I don't know if it matters, I'd want your opinion. Bottom of 7th Street, as you leave town and head up the tracks, and at Walmart, would there be any effectiveness to creating way more difficult access instead of almost a major highway where the bikes and carts can go? Would that create any effectiveness, or would there ultimately be a way around or less a way around? I'm just wondering, those two places particularly strike me as gateways that are wide open.
I can speculate that I don't know. So that could be a solution. It's going to be a temporary barrier because they're going to find a way around there, much like they found ways across the river to camp over by the pool. Matt Langhorst can tell you that their team's up in the hills, up at the park, Rodney, the Parks Department, they're up in the hills. I mean, they're finding ways around all over the place up above that BLD development. So wherever we put up a barrier, we go and eradicate a camp, then as the chief just recently said, they're going to move around that. So we try to do that and make it more difficult. And then it presents itself still. And allow me to say that, I'm always about getting us to a yes, finding a way to be there. And I implore upon our officers to be compassionate, professional at all times. And so with respect to the part about making it uncomfortable, I would say that might be the one exception where we really try to apply a lot of pressure to these repeat offenders, people, doing unsanitary things right in the core of our downtown, creating a medical problem that creates a need for an ambulance to come and transport them at several $1,000s and taking a crew offline So those people, we really try to bring them to the court's attention frequently. But it's almost like putting somebody back in the briar patch, that old story when we were children. They want to go to jail because then they want to have access to laundry, food, and a hot shower for another 30 days before they kind of dry out and they kind of detox and they come back out into the community. So what we try to do there's a counter to that at every opportunity. And so to your point, we do try and we're aware of it. I just don't know how effective we've been.
So my next question is somewhat rhetorical. We're all looking through this basically as through a housed lens, if you will. And what I heard was serious offenses are a relatively low percentage. This is rhetorical. I won't put you on the spot right now, but from a other than public safety, either sanitation or fire, I would wonder at some point a perspective of, do we really have a problem? And I'll leave that as rhetorical right now, but something to reflect.
Yeah, and it is rhetorical, but I would say, I would echo that being rhetorical, and that the reason I opened with, we've been dealing with this as long as I can remember, and we've been trying to find kind of creative ways to both be compassionate about it as well as be effective about kind of what the community is asking for. I do think that in the moment and in the year we're having, in the drought we're in, I think my personal concern, I think the fire department's concern, I think probably the staff's concern is, how is this going to play out? The reduction in federal resources, a limitation in the state budget, a very dry year, and this particular issue. And is this the place, that consistent to Councilor Schmall's point, consistent, aggressive removal of encampments on an ongoing basis, that may for this year be the appropriate response.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Weimer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I walked the encampment up above Walmart and REI last year, and it was like, I shared pictures, I think I remember, and it was pretty awful. There are 3 mattress retailers over there by REI. Not uncoincidentally, everyone on that hill is sleeping on an 8-inch Ultralux Sealy Posturepedic.
I didn't realize that. I didn't laugh, but that's interesting.
There are more mattresses on that hillside than in Princess and the Pea, right? Can we, so that right there is something that you can address,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
We need to beat the hell out of the landlord or the store managers or some responsible party. There are mattresses stacked up on the side of the building, right? You bring in your old mattress, you get a new one, or the delivery guy goes out with, and comes back that they're supposed to be, and there's all of, they're supposed to be disposed of properly. And there are the dumpsters and things over there, but I'm sure they get full. And it's just also easier to just dump.
Yeah.
And heck, I can dump it on behind the store, and the next morning it's magically gone, right? Like these things are happening very realistically over there. And so I would urge you, I think, to find some way to threaten the crap out of those guys over there, that they gotta police those mattresses a little better.
Yeah, and I actually really appreciate that insight. That was one that I had not put together. And I
Right.
think there are both in the current code as well as I may be back with a couple of tweaks to the code. That particular issue, that's something that is actionable for us.
I saw a tent that had 3 mattresses,
Mhm.
right? That guy was having the sleep of his life, right, in there. And it's little wonder, in some ways how we're making it more comfortable, right, for these guys to be homeless in Glenwood Springs, or at least up in there. The second thing that really bothered me about walking that, and I see the pictures and the 5-pound propane containers. Can we tax the crap out of those things within city limits? And I'm saying crap more tonight than I've had in the last few years, but
let me take a look. I think that there may be something that we,
Make those just prohibitively expensive, right? Again, huh?
I need those.
Well, you're gonna have to pay for it,
I'll go to.
right? Or you go outside of city limits to buy them, right? Honestly,
No,
like,
but
because these guys
raised
can't
enough- yeah,
these guys
absolutely.
can't necessarily just easily get the car and go down to,
Mhm.
you know, Pitkin or wherever, right? And so the REI that's there, the Walmart that is there, the Ace Hardware, right, that is there, all of those guys are selling those little canisters. And those are single-use jobbies.
Yeah.
Right? And so, you know, it's the fire deal. And second, it's just the litter, right? I don't think they're hazardous waste, but they're definitely it's metal and it's litter and it's just,
No,
it's
that's-
gross and it's necessary, right? So mattress, you know, nipping these things in the bud, right? So can we do something about the mattresses? And then can we look into something about, you know, taxing the heck out of these gas canisters?
Or maybe we just prohibit the sale within the
Or
city
prohibit the
limits.
sale of them.
So absolutely, those are great. I appreciate that because those are both, I'll look at the canisters. I know we can deal with mattresses. So let me take a look. I
Okay.
appreciate that.
Thank
That's
you,
great
sir.
insight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. You good? No more crap out of you? Okay. Counselor Zelinski, please.
So I too noticed the canisters and I meant to ask, I know that, I don't know if it's Catholic, I think it's Catholic Charities gives out camping equipment, because I always wondered if they were buying those canisters or if that was something that they were getting. And I did not find out, and I apologize.
Yeah, no, and we can look into that. I mean, I do think that. in the
Because looking at
context
the
of-
volume of them, I would be surprised if they were being purchased, because we are looking at tens of hundreds. I mean, there's
Yeah, I
not
mean,
dozens, it's lots.
I think that probably yes on both. There probably some are being purchased, some are being handed out, some are being donated.
Some
and
are
that-
being stolen.
some are being
So-
stolen. Right,
Sto-
like there's
stolen is
a
a whole
wide
different
variety
thing,
of
but
ways that they're going to get in.
The
into
things that we
mix.
can control, because
No, and I think that's a fair point, and it may be, part of that is talking to our outdoor retailer community, not only in the context of, are we regulating them? Do we need to ban them because of the fire season? I mean, I think there's a real nexus there that we can talk about in terms of that use and that risk. But also, you have companies, I mean, our outdoor retailers are incredibly generous in this community about trying to be helpful, about donating time to trails, materials, all kinds of things, and talking to them about maybe what's the right thing to donate and the wrong thing to donate in the context of the moment we're in right now in this fire season.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions on our end? We got Counselor Smith.
I have two questions that are just clarifications of what I think I heard, and one that will make, a third one that'll make eyes roll. The camping bans that the city has imposed are all on city-owned land or public right of way, or what's?
Public right of way and city lands, so like there's no camping in the parks. Parks are closed overnight. There is you can look in the code. There's a designated area in kind of downtown 6th Street. Any of the underpasses that are designated as no camping. The places that would be a place that you would want to camp if you were looking for a place, right? All of those are banned. I do think that we can look at expanding that. I do think that one of the problems we have is that while we can say it's prohibited and we can move people along, the reason I opened with the limitations on enforcement is because there's a limitation on enforcement, right? Like, that's kind of one of those realities. And we've also tried to identify the areas where we have had historically the most problems are the ones that are designated no camping.
Are you limited in, well, my second question maybe negates this question, so I'll ask the second question first. Do I understand right that the grants pass overturn, if you will, of recent time is a threat to even those existing municipal camping bans?
The overturn of grants pass potentially, essentially what it did is it said, at least in the fact pattern of grants pass, which was the Ninth Circuit had found that where a community had no alternative to sleeping on the street. There was no shelter space. There was no alternative. There was essentially no place to rest. That criminalizing that behavior in that context was cruel and unusual because the person didn't have any place else to go, right? Like what, you know, at some point you have to sit down, right? You can't be moving at all times. That was the premise of Grants Pass. What the Supreme Court did was overturn that and say, as long as it's regulating conduct, you have to, essentially on a case-by-case basis, prove the nexus between what you just enforced and it being cruel and unusual punishment. In other words, they were trying to separate back again to, we're just, you know, we're talking about if it applies to everybody and it only applies to conduct, even though occasionally it has a disparate impact, it's not facially invalid under the Constitution as cruel and unusual punishment.
So our current
is
public spaces bans would still stand up.
Is still fine.
Okay.
And, you know, probably could be expanded a little bit. I don't know, we analyzed that a year and a half ago or a year ago when that case came out. I don't know that it would materially change the actual activity because we have designated those areas which were the most popular in town. There's no camping already, so.
When you were describing it, in response to another question, the appeal of our town to getting around with limited resources, if I may.
Yeah.
You mentioned we have a lot of tourists. Are tourists uniquely a target for the panhandling or for other?
Yeah, I mean, I think it reflects a certain wealth in a community. You have lots of new targets on a daily basis, right? I mean, it is not typically solicitation is something you don't usually have repeat customers. And so that turnover, that activity that goes with a tourist community makes it attractive. And you also have the opportunity for a lot of people who are thinking about a lot of other things, for a lot of petty crimes that we may or may not catch people in the act of doing, right? Like if you've gone to Europe and visited, you know, you go to the Eiffel Tower and there's a reason why people can't find their phones and their wallets when they're looking at the Eiffel Tower.
So tourists are more vulnerable than necessarily targeted. Okay. And then the eyes rolling question is there any organization among these folks? Are there any leaders who could affect behavior if negotiated with?
Not my experience, even in a major US city that I came from, that's not the case. These are pretty individualized. There might be a couple of families that get together, but generally speaking, they're unorganized individuals. Certainly in Glenwood Springs, that's the case.
Thank you.
Kind of a quintessential libertarian.
Was that it, Steve?
Wasn't too bad. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, okay, great. Any other questions? No, thank you. Hang around. I'm just gonna give the public a chance to speak on this quick.
Okay, I thought you were starting to ask questions.
I don't have any, I have comments. So I know the rules, I'll wait. So anybody from the public, please come forward, state your name and whether you live in city limits or not. And let us hear your comments.
Good evening. I'm Ray Tenney and I live at 928 Cooper.
Thank you.
So I live across from the parking garage and between Feed My Sheep and the extended table. So we see a lot of the people. I've lived there 22 years. We see a lot of the people that you're discussing on a regular basis. We see the regulars, and then when it starts to warm in the low country, we start to see what we call the vagabonds, the people that are passing through, case in the alley, looking for a quick something or other. But always we see these people engage with these support services, and that attracts them to downtown. Another thing that attracts them to downtown, and we've engaged with the police department, code enforcement people and others several times over the years, but drinking is apparently allowed in Centennial Park. There's 2 parks in the city limits where we're told drinking is allowed. Two Rivers Park and Centennial Park. It's a remnant of this Tuesday market. And so that's why these guys are allowed to gather there and do their drinking and so on. Also, there's a large frequent use of the parking garage for repeat overnight stays. And we actually are in the taxing district that pays for the parking garage. When it was first built, we used it a lot in the winter to avoid scraping and stuff. We won't go near it now. It's unsafe, it's unsanitary, people down there with knives, smoking stuff. And so that's very discouraging. And then once on the 16th Street Mall, we bought this little newspaper from an unhoused person that was actually trying to sell something. In the back was a list of all the great free services in the state, and Glenwood was prominently listed, where you could get food, shelter, take a bath, that kind of thing. So, you know, we have a lot of friends in town that think it's great to bring food down to the extended table and feed my sheep and stuff, but it brings these people there. And I guess, frankly, I wish they'd feed them in their own neighborhoods, so they would get to experience what goes on downtown. Thank you very much for all your discussion, and it's great to hear that it's gathering some attention.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anybody else? Just one comment. Okay, then I will close the public portion, bring it back to us, and now let's have some comments and let's them have some discussion and maybe give some direction to staff to see how we want to proceed with this. We'll start with Councillor Weimer.
I think my comment tonight relates to the fact that I actually worked with Extended Table for 2 years. I cooked a meal monthly for maybe 2.5 years, and quit because I felt like I was becoming I was part of the problem. Right? We talk about how easy, perhaps, or easier it is to be homeless or unhoused in Glenwood than other. I think we have a lot of services, and I don't know that, you know, all of those services are fully aligned with a broader goal of moving homelessness out of the city. And if it was up to me, I wouldn't have given lift up to 25 grand out of the financial advisory board. And I'll be opposed to anything they come back and ask for, simply because they need to better bifurcate their services to those who are down on their luck and need food and need some free groceries to go home and make a good meal, versus those that are just showing up for free pasta. And I saw the same people. I still know them by name because I run into them at the grocery store, or I see them, you know, on the street. And it was just the same guys for 2 years, just coming by every night for a free meal. And that's not what I had intended that service to be. So I guess my comment, it's not direction necessarily. It's just that I think we have to really take a holistic look at the services that we as a city endorse within the town or within the city. Really think through, in some cases, the unintended consequences of those services, and consider thoughtfully how we make our decisions as to who we distribute our limited funds to. So that's my comment for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Townsley.
That was actually kind of exactly what I was going to ask, is if Lift Up is coming to us for money, do we know whether or not, or how much of that food is going to feed the same population of people that want a different lifestyle? So I would hope that we would at least ask that question, maybe before they came back, they could have a good answer to that for us. And probably some of the others too, if we're doing that on a regular basis, because I think we want to be compassionate to certain people and certain groups, but if we're, feeding the birds and then we're surprised because there's bird poop all over our porch, it seems kind of pointless.
Thank you. Counselor Zelinski.
So I did the math from lift up slides, 13%. It was so many percent was children, so many percent was working families, so many percent was the elderly, and then 13% was unaccounted for. So there's 13% they didn't identify in their slides. I deducted that might be, of the 100% of the people that they serve. So it's a small percentage. I think that, I kind of agree with all that we're saying. I'm not philosophically opposed to people who don't want to live in a traditional housing situation. My problem comes with people that have disdain from the community that I love and make it really uncomfortable for those of us who live here and work hard to do so. And that's where I'm trying to kind of find common ground. I've never really like I said, I ran a bar downtown. I never really hated the fact that we had people there that were untraditional and unconventional. I don't like it when it becomes something that makes living here unpleasant and uncomfortable or dangerous. And so, I don't know how we strike a balance. I'm not comfortable with like removing all services. I'm not even uncomfortable with somebody who comes and gets a meal every night because that's how he lives. Unless he poops like on the sidewalk, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm not sure how we have this balance that recognizes we can't dictate all human behavior, but we can dictate the standards that we live within. And that's what I'd like to try and have a deeper conversation coming to some sort of a solution. Like, where within the bounds of the law can we make it so that we aren't dealing with things that are unsafe, unclean, and unhealthy? And I don't know what that looks like, but that's what I would like to start working towards.
Thank you. Counselor Schachter.
Thank you. I get the sense from my peers, and there's some leeway I get from legal, that at least we can perhaps focus and increase resources wherever possible toward addressing this, and that how much is yet to be determined. I see three things. I thought Mitchell and Ray, there are some very specific things that were identified tonight that are actionable, whether it be the parking garage, whether it be canisters, mattresses. Perhaps I wasn't clear what we can enforce under the bridge or not, but if we have a reasonable amount of jurisdiction there and we can define what camping is, there are cases there where there's a spot where I don't think we should ever have horizontal camping and stuff spread like we saw this week, and to be able to move it, realizing we're not moving it out, we're moving it to a different place. So there's some actionable items I saw. Public safety and fire risk would be the #1 priority this year. So whatever we can do with or without the county and BLM to clean up that hazard and whatever it takes, I think that would be a high priority, and it's going to cost money, but that's money well spent as opposed to fighting a fire. The third thing is more delicate. I think a couple councils addressed with it. This is not one size fits all. So there are services that I think Glenwood should continue to maintain, and it's mostly transient emergencies as opposed to full-time houselessness. So to continue to have special emergency housing for a night or two for a family that's stuck, or gas services, or our safe house, and mental health referral, and in some cases, directing through our money to lift up to permanent families who are continually hungry. Those things continue. If we can split those out, those are the three things I heard tonight and would like to see pursued to the extent we have the resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Schmall.
So we can dance around a lot of these issues, but I think we have to start with defining what is unacceptable social behavior in our town. And most of the things that have been inspired, that have inspired this meeting tonight, are unacceptable social behaviors. I don't think anyone would dispute that. So we can define that and enforce it somehow. It's desirable for us to do that and then deal with the consequences. The consequences of cost and the consequences of facilities. But I tell you, if we won't, I hear all the time about how our town relies on the tourist economy. If you want to destroy the tourist economy, we're on our way. I suspect it's going down right now. Some of it's because of financial cost, lots of other considerations. But some of it's because of the appearance. And we can dress up the alleys and spend millions of dollars cleaning up around dumpsters. But if we allow unacceptable social behavior to continue in our town, our tourism is going to decline.
Thank you. Counselor Smith.
Thank you. Turns out I actually have another question that I didn't think to ask before until Ray asked his. A meeting or two ago, the city council approved auxiliary budget reprogramming, or whatever the right terminology is, some updates to the budget that included some carryover funding for work at the downtown parking garage, so rehabilitations and repairs and physical things mainly, I think. Is there any component of that that will discourage camping or affect it at all?
That's not really the point of those improvements. Those are all pretty structural, but I mean, it's certainly something that we can look at. I mean, I hear complaints about that parking garage a lot.
So it's really just repairing the drainage and the lighting and
structural.
Thank you.
Counselor Zelinski.
I do want to ask, or would we be able to make Centennial Park a no alcohol without special permit location fairly easily? Can we do that right away?
Yeah, we can, you know, it's a public park. You guys
There-
set the rules.
Would there be
specific to it.
support to that? Okay, I would like to propose, I would like to make a motion.
Let's wait.
Let me do this instead of having you do it by motion. I mean, I think I see general consensus.
Yeah, that's not okay. Like, I just want
You
to
know,
make.
it's a drafting exercise for my office to get something back to
Perfect.
you. And, you know, frankly, it's something I want to sit down with the park staff and the PD and talk about, are there other areas that we're seeing issues that we need to address? Similarly, let's hit it at one time.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, is something like that, you know, not, so that we can still have events and things, it just has to be a special permit, some sort of a process. So it's probably it's more than just like making it illegal there, because we're gonna have to define the process for making it legal and what that looks like. But if we could start working on that, that'd be great.
Okay, and Counselor Schmall.
I just have one more comment, because I know that we've said a number of things, but I think the essence is that there probably are enough tools, if there is the will, to enact a change in what we've tolerated for so long. And maybe that's not a motion, but maybe it's a consensus of this dais that we want to improve the situation and reduce the amount of unacceptable social behavior in our town. Staff can get creative, and they can come up with things that they need from us, a list for us, what they need from us in order to affect that change, if they know that we have the will to affect the change. So I would defer to Mr. Mayor to determine what that will is.
Well, I think, like we always do, we give direction to staff, and every single opinion, 1 out of 7 counts a lot. And you just voiced what you think is the way forward, and I think most of us would agree with that. But we don't really need to motion that or agree on that. We just can let them hear.
I mean, I think we've heard, you know,
the consensus.
want us to, you know, to apply pressure where we can, within the bounds of the law, that we can. And, you know, I think that recognize that we will be addressing conduct. And so there are going to be some tourists getting some tickets along with other folks. Just, I mean, let's be clear, we're going to be addressing conduct. So there, you know, it's a mixed bag, right? Like, I guess that's what I'm saying. I'm not suggesting we're not going to do it. You just have to recognize that there are, you know, it's like the traffic cams when you put them up. It's not going to discriminate between whether you're a local going too fast or somebody that is a commuter going through.
That's fair. Any other comments? If I see none, I'll give my 2 cents. I echo everything I heard. I think everybody had a valid point. Oh, did you want to say something before I go?
Wait, what would a tourist be doing that would be similar to camping out with all your trash
So
somewhere?
falls asleep in a chair underneath the bridge on 7th Street. That technically is a violation of the camping. Right. That's what I mean. It's like, there's a, you know, tourist who is publicly intoxicated. Or a local, frankly. I mean, there's a lot of overlap in that conduct that we just have to be cognizant of the fact that we need to be even-handed in our enforcement of that, you know, those rules. That's all.
Well, and maybe we start with the stuff where it's like, okay, there's 5 mattresses in a tent, and you know,
Right.
if that stuff keeps disappearing after a while, it becomes a lot of work on me to keep replacing it, especially if there's no more mattresses. So I mean,
And I guess that's where I was going, is that I think that there is a wide variety of tools available to us. And I think, honestly, from what I heard from you guys before the mayor speaks, and I apologize, Mr. Mayor, I heard a lot of focus on our concerns regarding the wildfire season. And I think that is the one that probably in the moment, I'm feeling the most urgency out of you guys.
that's correct from my standpoint.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks, Dave. So where was I? Oh, a couple of add-ons here. I think I would like to see a proposal from you guys, from chief, both chiefs, city manager, on cost for more frequent cleanups. I know it's a pain, but I think the harder we make it, the less, hopefully the less it'll happen. Also, what it would take, and I know it's hard for you to find resource officer, I get it, but I think it would be wise to see if we had 2 people, that's their job. 2 officers, that's their job. That's what they do. They keep our town clean. This is a bad way to say it, but that's what they will do. I'd like to see a proposal on that, how much that will cost. I think it'd be, even just for information, for us to know what the price tag is, where it will come from, how we would pay for it, and so on. Secondly, a fire season, yes, canister, like I said, I agree with everything I heard. And number 3, I had a lovely chat with a councilwoman from Durango today. Tried to reach the mayor, but she's smart like me. She didn't have her phone number on the website, so I had to call the only one I could get, and that was Councilwoman Jessica. Her last name eludes me right now. But she was great. She jumped right in, and we chatted for about 10, 15 minutes. And I would like to encourage you to call Durango back. It's been about 2 years since they implemented. I know you said it's a beautiful website and there's all these rules and all that kind of stuff. What she told me, and this is not from the police, this is from a council person that is on the legislative side, it cleaned up their downtown. Yeah, they're still around. She said, do not do a camp. Discourage the complete, do not do a camp. You're gonna have chaos. And I would agree to that. But she did say we have a calmer situation downtown. We have no overnight stays or very little. Our police force has been retrained. And I know you guys are doing great. This is not telling you what you need and need not to, you know me, Chief. But they've been retrained to be very, like you, very gentle in their ways forward. But their chief, like ours, is a very reasonable person, and they figured out how to move them along. They just move them along. They don't linger anymore downtown. She said it cleaned up our downtown. And then the third thing she said is they got a new judge who is actually prosecuting to jail time. That was his recommendation, and they're doing it. But here was the little bit of a caveat with that is La Plata County said we don't want unhoused. So they refused to take the unhoused, so they had to move to the county over and sign a contract with them. So they could house or lodge, as you guys say, the unhoused. I'm not saying we need to do any of this, but I'm just saying, I think it's worth another chat, maybe city manager to city manager, city attorney to city attorney, chief to chief again. Just checking in. It's been 2 years since you guys have spoken. How did it work out? Where are you guys at? There was no more bark from ACLU. They kind of let them do the thing. So I know it's not the golden ticket, and I know there's always going to be issues, but I think for a step forward or 2 steps forward, I think it's worth a chat with Durango.
I was curious because one of the things Durango was doing when I was down there the last time their team came in and talked about it, they were running kind of joint teams with mental health professionals
Correct.
on a response team. And that was one of the things that I'm glad you brought them up again. That was a really fascinating tool that they were using, that they had a specialized detail that included, I want to say, a social worker and a mental health professional that was available, right?
She didn't say the exact lineup, but I would imagine that is a must. I would imagine you need that kind of support with your officers if you go into this. So the last thing is the camping. And I understand sleeping in a chair, I'm guilty of it on a bench. Yeah, I do it. But can we just make it citywide? Is that a thing?
I think we probably can. Like I said, I think where I would rather focus is where we're seeing on city property that we don't have designated right now, where it is actually a problem. Because keeping in mind, that would also apply to you and your RV.
Understand.
Completely
understand.
So that was, a little bit of our thinking about those areas. And so we'll go back and
I get
revisit
it.
that. But let me take a look at that again, because I think that outside of by way of example, the gentleman that Sumner and I see on our morning walks, right? That's just part of that is just because our guys can't be there right then to get him up and get him moved on, right? That's just a number of people in a location and a time, right?
An add-on to this is though, when you do look at the areas that are most popular or important for tourist circulation or whatever, I don't want them to just move 2 blocks over and then be in front of residential houses or near the parking garage. I'd rather they move further out. So that's why I think we really need to look hard of no camping or no overnight or no covered camp. I don't know. I don't know. Just a thought that we should look at. So with that, we got Councillor Smith, an additional comment?
Yes, thank you.
I'm done. Thank you.
Well, and your comments helps me think of one, so appreciate it. The invitation for the professionals to bring a proposal is a smart move, obviously. I will look as one member askance at proposals that increase. Well, let me back up. In February, I enjoyed a really thorough orientation to the police department. I was able to sit in on one of the city staff's enrichment programs, wellness programs. And so I got a very thorough tour of the department, but also of their training and their skills and their style and their personalities and their ability to respond to a variety of situations and a variety of individuals. It's an incredibly talented organization. And I'm going to be really reluctant to take on proposals that make them into garbage services.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't want that kind of talent.
That's not what I meant.
Being used to move trash.
That's not what I meant.
And I know you don't mean that.
Yeah.
But I want to be sure that that's something.
No, that's part of the proposal.
That I, for one, am not looking for.
Yeah, no. Yeah, that's not clearly not what I meant. I meant you guys do your job and then the cleanup crew does their job. And Steve Boyd and I had an interesting discussion a little this afternoon. We were talking, there's got to be somebody out there that specializes in this. There has to be. There has to be a consulting firm. There has to be anybody out there who's an expert. I know it's a touchy subject, but I think it might be worth a search to see who we can drum up. I'm just dealing with an unhoused population in town. And the ramifications that come with it. There's gotta be somebody out there. It's just short of the ACLU. Don't want to talk to them. So anyway, if we're all good, you guys have direction. I think everybody kind of has direction a little bit, and please bring something back. Love to see it. Thank you. Thank you all for this engaged discussion. It was really good. Back to council for comments, and we'll start with Councillor Townsley. No, Councillor Small. Okay, thank you. I accept that. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Zelinski? Nothing. Councillor Smith?
These
Oh.
these are generalized, wrap it up comments. right?
Absolutely. We have arrived at that point.
No disrespect to Councilor Schmal's comment about downtown investments. The alleys look terrific.
Yes.
I'm really impressed. I never believed that alleys could become so functional for their basic purposes, but also become human thoroughfares. It's really a simple but thorough and nice transformation. And the city has for a year now, approximately, had an energy and climate action plan that the city council approved based on recommendations from partner organizations and a really thorough staff involvement. One of the provisions in that is that by June 15th of each year, there is to be an update, kind of a progress report on that plan intended to again inform the budgeting process. So June 15th is coming, so I'm curious if the council might be looking forward to an update report on that, or will that just be folded into the budgeting process?
I don't remember it being June 15th, but that might be right. But yeah, we'll come back.
For about this time of year. I'd be intrigued to hear it when it's freestanding form, but if it informs the budget, that's the most important part. Recently, the 3 new kids on the council, as part of our onboarding, I love that term. It sounds like we're going on a train ride. Had a very thorough orientation and tour with the Parks and Recreation Department, senior staff, and an actual tour. And I just learned a lot and was really impressed and gratified by all the range of services that they provide. To me, among the many other things we learned, 2 particular things came out. I discovered that there is a city facilities superintendent that, curiously enough, is housed in the Parks Department, but is responsible for all of the city's buildings in terms of maintenance, repairs, updating of efficiencies, and specifically, Ethan is focused and well skilled at implementation of the climate action plan in city buildings, and he's got it. That's an impressive character. I was really gratified that somebody out there is paying attention to that. The other thing that stood out for me from that tour is it really feels like it's time to get deliberate about solving the shooting range situation in South Canyon. As I understood it from the orientation with the police involved as well as the park staff that day, this has just been kind of a high-centered discussion that we can't quite figure out. I would love to do anything we can to figure it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schechter.
Nothing.
Councillor Weimer?
Good.
Excellent. Just real quick, nobody mentioned it to Steve, but I'm glad Matt's here. Same pet peeve as always, the lights under the bridge.
Problem now.
They're not on. They've been off all weekend. And I'm gonna check now to see if they're on today, but it happens. I know the timers are bad, so.
I think it's that, it's something else.
Is something else now? Okay.
Go check it out. And they were off last Friday when I went down there, then they were on Saturday and Sunday.
They were not on Saturday. I didn't see it.
They were on on Saturday, but I don't know what time till.
Okay, well,
On at like 8 o'clock when I went down there.
Okay.
Anyhow, yes.
okay. It's just, it's,
Already aware.
okay, good. I knew you would be.
Lot and clap, there's all kinds of things.
There's a mess going on. Okay, because part of security, part of seeing, so you don't fall over the rocks and all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, that was it. Moving on to city manager for tonight.
Let's see, a couple of things. We did have a meeting this morning with Michael Merrill from the Gun Club, so I think that we've got an update coming up for you guys at some point. The second thing is, this hasn't closed yet, so I can't say too much about it, but there is some chance that an employee of the city of Glenwood Springs is going to close on a unit that we have a preference in L3, those lofts. So if that happens, that would be pretty cool, and this person happens to be somebody that we'd like to keep around for a while. So
Excellent.
potential for a small win there. The third thing, last thing, is that RAFTA is doing a zero fare pilot program up Valley, and the city of Aspen and the elected officials transportation commission, I think those two are throwing in something like $500,000. RAFTA is looking to raise a total of $550,000, and so they had asked Kurt Ravenschlag to ask Down Valley RAFTA members for a small, mostly symbolic donation of like $10,000 to the project. A lot of the information that they're going to collect from that will probably benefit us. So if I don't hear a strong objection, I'm going to put $10,000 in our bus tax fund into the next budget appropriation to say yes to their request on that. And I think that was it for me.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, Steve. City attorney.
I don't think I have anything. I talked more tonight than I have in 3 years.
It's very informative. Thank you. Yeah, you did talk a lot.
We didn't wear you out, did we?
Most of the time, nobody wants to hear me talk. Just trust me. Like it's
Ryan, no correspondence, right? Not for tonight. Okay, great. Item 12, council social event.
Long day.
Yellow, turn the microphone on, one or the other.
We go into our,
Yeah, regular spot.
all right, usual spot, back holidays convening right after this.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I'm entertaining a motion to adjourn this meeting. And that would be Councilor Weimer.
So moved.
Have a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, see none. This meeting is adjourned.